From the time she was a child, Helena was strong. She was the third born of her family with 5 siblings, all boys. She was quick to learn that if you were not strong, you did not survive. Anything her brothers or father did, she wanted to help with or be a part of. Hunting, fishing, fighting, wrestling. She learned it all and she adapted. And most importantly, she won. Her brothers also learned swiftly that Helena was not to be taken lightly in competitive or physical sports and games. As she grew up, Helena's passion for combat and glory grew, and by the time she was a young woman, Helena had declared she wished to fight for Valkenheim. Her father couldn't have been more proud, and none of her brothers dared speak up against her, for all in her family knew her strength. The Jarl, Einar Golderson, was curious to see how she fared in battle, so before he would accept her as a warrior, he first had to see her fight his own champions. Helena was set to fight in a pit with a warlord named Radvi and a berserker named Lotten. Armed with nothing but practice staves, they had just 10 minutes. Helena was done in 5. Like a bear unleashed on mere elk, she threw herself at Lotten and slammed him to the ground with her bare hands, before turning on Radvi with her stave and smashing it so hard across his face she broke his jaw. After the fight, she beamed brightly at her victory and basked in the glory of her win, but this time something had changed. She no longer felt the admiring gaze or cheers of her brothers and family, but the shocked and disbelieving stares and gasps of a crowd of strangers. She did not know it, but Helena had become a legend, and in a manner she wished she had not. Legends of Helena the Beast circulated around Valkenheim over the years. A woman so brutal and so powerful, even bears knew to flee when she appeared. With muscles bigger than boulders and a roar to challenge thunderclaps, some said she was touched by the gods, and others that she was a mistake, a man born as a woman just trying to get out. And Helena detested it all. She hated the rumors and the whispers and the looks. Though she was a raider now and considered a great warrior to the people of her home, she was also seen as a spectacle. Every battle she fought, she proved her merit and her strength, her Dane axe claiming the lives of knights and samurai in equal measure, and even more legends spawned from this, further cementing her as less than a woman and more a force of destruction, a beast let loose on prey. When she turned 30, Helena was still unmarried, though she desperately wanted to be, if for no other reason than to prove herself a woman. After all, for a man to wed Helena, they must be able to move that mountain, and no man yet could or would. Most feared the attempt, some thinking she would eat them alive for trying, and this led to even more wild rumors. That her last suitor, for example, had been snapped in half, that she'd literally turned into a wolf and torn apart a man who asked her hand in marriage. With each new rumor and each legend, Helena grew more and more resentful. She walked about the village with a scowl on her face and pain in her heart. The sneers she wore as people shouted out to her only further confirmed the slanderous beliefs they held for her and in their hearts. For Helena, it was all too much. True, raiders may be legendary, but not all legends are ones that one wishes to be told about. Her family worried for her. She had lost that competitive longing she used to have. In fact, she often found excuses not to engage in games or sports or even battle, all things she used to adore. Anything she would do, she feared, would only make people talk more about how she was more beast than woman, and she just couldn't bear it anymore. However, 2 years later, a new rumor began to spread, a rumor that shocked all of Valkenheim to the core. The beast had been tamed. Indeed, it was an outstanding story to hear, but supposedly a man had finally bested Helena the Beast. None were sure how, of course. What kind of monster could overpower Helena? Who would dare try? Vikings from all over Valkenheim traveled to Helena's home to ask about this new husband of the Beast Queen, to see what kind of monster could claim her, but he was never around. Some thought the rumors false at first, and yet Helena herself had obviously changed. Her scowl that she often wore was gone, her face shining with a happiness that was, dare anyone say it aloud, feminine. In fact, some said she was practically cute. Though she was still tall, her muscles still toned and present, and her skill no less evident in sparring matches and games of strength, there was a new air about her that radiated like a newlywed, a giggling bride just after a honeymoon. There could be no question. Someone had finally tamed the beast. But who? The mystery kept many talking, and there were more than a few attempts to find out the identity of the mystery husband of Helena. However, he was elusive, and any time he was asked for, Helena would explain that he had left to handle his own business. She would say this with such a big smile on her face that some wondered if perhaps he was a Jarl himself, and it was all a secret affair. The legend only grew. However, one fateful winter, news reached Helena's village that finally put the legend to bed. During the winter, to ensure that Valkenheim never suffered a famine like the one Apollyon caused, the Vikings worked to establish trade routes and diplomatic relations with foreign lands, and make allies such as the Varangians and the Arabians. After the incident with the Ephyra and the Celestial Sphere caused by Ravier and Horkos, many of the surviving Arabian cities had grown wary of Heathmoor, fearing further attacks from her people, and in some cases they formed military bands to fight them whenever they came near. In this case, a diplomatic party from Heathmoor had been captured by a mercenary band of Ephyra calling themselves the Sultana's Vengeance. A concerted effort was made by Valkenheim to go and deal with this band, and to everyone's surprise, Helena was the first to sign on. Her expression one of fierce determination and even rage, showing that old beast was stirring once again. And that's when the coin dropped. Her husband was among the captured diplomats. Now every Viking wished to join her to get a look at the elusive husband. A rescue effort was formed in one night, and they began their quest east to destroy the Sultana's Vengeance and rescue the envoy, and get a look at Helena's husband at the same time. Helena spoke to no one during the journey. Her hand was always gripping her axe with ruthless anxiety, her eyes twitching, her teeth bared. All could see the animal stirring under the skin and knew better than to approach her. For 4 days of travel, Helena only ate, drank, slept, and marched as she readied herself for the battle to come. The Sultana's Vengeance was held up in an old fortress that was lightly guarded. They weren't just Ephyra, either. There were a handful of other warriors, including a Shugoki guard, a few conquerors from Ashfeld, and one Medjay. The Valkenheim force that arrived on the scene was mighty in its own right. 200 Vikings strong, with the best that Einar could offer, and leading the vanguard was none other than Helena the Beast. With a roar of fury, the Viking charge began. The Shugoki guard rushed out to meet them with the Ephyra and even the Medjay in tow. The collision shook the foundations of their very formation. As all the Shugoki were an unstoppable charging force, they shoved lesser Vikings out of their way as they barreled into the Highlanders and Berserkers of the rear guard. The Medjay was a whirling storm of destruction, his dual blades cutting through guards and catching 2 warlords by surprise. And the Ephyra, for their part, were winding and slipping into the battle like shadows, sneaking past the guards and shields of their foes, and striking with sudden mace blows that left blood flying and skulls cracked. But any Viking that took the time to notice would have seen a sight most terrifying. One poor Shugoki had not broken through the Viking formation as he was being pushed back by a mad beast, her hand grasping his throat with a force to break stone as she ran him back and threw him away from her. The enormous warrior crashed to the earth, and as his head came up, it met the edge of her axe, burying deep into his forehead. Taking advantage of this, an Ephyra leapt at Helena from behind, intent to grapple her with one of their acrobatic leg grapples. But the moment her leg met Helena's neck, the raider grabbed her ankle and swung her to the ground beside the Shugoki. She then laid the Ephyra's face against the pommel of her axe before kicking hard and plunging the pommel through her eye. The Ephyra's scream of pain was then cut off as Helena broke her neck in the next movement with her knee. Even her compatriots stared in horror, as in only moments 2 of the enemy lay dead at the feet of the brutal beast of Valkenheim. The Ephyra and remaining Shugoki redoubled their efforts. But not to be outdone by their ally, the Vikings began to regain their footing and surround the Shugoki, who had so foolishly charged into their number. Steel dug into flesh, and shouts of pain and death filled the night sky as blood flowed like fountains. For though the Shugoki may be big, they also make easy targets. The Medjay, who had stood alone for so long, was now backing away fearfully as he was being surrounded by the warriors of the icy north. He let out a shout of anger and tried to swing his blade staff at the nearest foe, only for Helena to appear and grab the staff. The 2 began a brutal wrestle for the weapon. The Medjay struck her across the face, and she repaid him by thrusting her knee into his abdomen. The Medjay buckled, and Helena snorted blood from her nose and grabbed his face in her hand and hurled him to the ground, slamming her foot down on his chest as she roared and brought her axe down upon his head, ending the life of the lone Egyptian warrior. After almost an hour of fighting, Only a handful of Ephyra and mercenary warriors remained, and one could only imagine what sight they must have beheld. Marching across their wasteland, an army of barbarians from a foreign land, led by a woman with blood smearing her features, muscles that made her appear like a demon among her own kind, and an axe stained with the intestines and viscera of their comrades. The woman at their front snarled in the direction of the beleaguered and terrified Ephyra and spoke.
"Hand over the ones you've taken now, or all of Valkenheim will be lulled by your screams."
She hefted the axe in warning, and the Ephyra backed away fast. One ran back to the fortress to do as told, while every other warrior slowly and hesitantly dropped to their knees to comply with the demands of the Vikings. In the excitement of the battle, some of the warriors had forgotten part of their reason for coming here. All were now gathering to receive the captive diplomats. From out of the bowels of the fortress emerged 5 men. 2 were recognized as Valkenheim natives, a Valkyrie and a warlord, but the others were foreign. One was a warden with shabby armor and an aged body with white hair and beard that showed how he was well past his fighting prime. The next was a samurai, an Aramusha with a straw hat and worn armor. The last one to emerge wore a cowl with him and a staff in hand. As he removed his hood, long brown locks met their eyes, in a warm face with soft features. He looked about them, and his eyes fell on Helena, and as they did, he smiled. "Helena!" he cried.
"David!"
she exclaimed, running to him and wrapping her arms around the man. He was easily a head shorter than her. His orientation was not that of Valkenheim, and then it set in. A Wulin, one of the Shaolin of the East, the one known as Bao Shin, the wandering monk. None moved, and none spoke. All merely stared in disbelief as the mighty beast of Valkenheim whimpered and cooed like a puppy, missing its master as she cried and embraced the monk, who stroked her hair and held on to her affectionately.
"Thank God. When I heard, I feared for you. I thought the worst."
"I am alive, Helena. I'm alive, as I promised you I would be," he answered. "I knew you would come if anything bad happened." Already, as the two held each other, rumors fired up once again, spreading like wildfire as to how this foreign monk could win the heart of so mighty a woman. But none of their words or stories affected Helena now. The legends meant nothing to her, for she knew, as did Bao Shen, a story they would never share, a story only they could enjoy together between the two of them, a truth that they would cling to in matrimony, and until death did they part.